I would like today to talk about my program, the Pedagogy of Action. And my, my greatest quest is, how do I teach students who hear every day that America is the greatest country in the world and Americans are the greatest, to learn humility? How can I teach people who are, who are privileged, that they can be equal to Mr. Bango, who teaches at Cato Crest Primary School in Durban, and his class is 65-1, the ratio, and picks Viso to be involved with us because he needs some confidence. Or to Giovanni, who sews on the buttons of the students' uniforms because their parents cannot find any buttons. How can I teach those students that they can be equal to these people? I would like to think that my students would never think this consciously about themselves. In their body language, I see it in their eyes, and sometimes in their words. I want so much to give these students new eyes to see the world and themselves. And this is what I try to do in the Pedagogy of Action program, which is a program I have developed, and I've been working on it for like 14 years now at the University of Michigan, where I take students abroad, largely to South Africa, to teach low literate people an HIV intervention module that is completely oral and taught regardless of literacy and regardless of education and age. Community members learn it and develop it into their own languages. We leave the skills with the people rather than leave we leave the skills with the people rather than leave with the skills. Using this methodology that new teachers in South Africa have taught, going to their villages and going to their rural communities, have taught over the years over 20,000 people. The pedagogy that is used in the Pedagogy of Action was developed to begin the process of education regardless of literacy. So in this pedagogy, the non-literate person could teach and receive a certificate without knowing how to read and write. To know, to have ideas, to be conscious, to understand oppression, to speak, do not require literacy, and therefore it is entirely possible to build a pedagogy based on such powerful givens. The information must be so simple and ownable that they must immediately feel and think that they can do it. That to get up and teach it would not be a hurdle which they can easily overcome. The point is to remove those who do not know yet the written word from a condition of submission and passivity. It is this that is the essence of empowerment. But I speak here not about the program, the Pedagogy of Action, but how through this program I teach American students humility, respect, and consciousness. The POA is study abroad as counter-hegemonic education. The Pedagogy of Action has about 10 principles, and I will give you a couple of them. The first one is that Africa should be known through its people. No one should leave Africa with more pictures of animals than people. The foundational theory of the Pedagogy of Action is Freire. Theory must not be separated from action. It must be praxis. It must be reflection, action, reflection, and then action again. These reflection meetings are not group therapy. They require political and ideological analysis. It must always involve discussions of actions which are geared towards dismantling oppressive structures. And of course, they always complain that they have to meet every single night, but they have to. I will tell you two stories of praxis. These stories are outcomes of a process that lasted a year. A student cannot participate in the Pedagogy of Action without spending 2 semesters with me before leaving, which is not a very inviting thought, but there you go. Last year, we did not go to South Africa. We went to Jamaica. There we taught several groups, Jamaica Forum for Lesbians and Gays, Jamaica Aid Support, Caribbean Communities for Vulnerable Children, and we also, for the first time, were allowed in a church. One of my students, Carson, was teaching a young woman who was having difficulty learning the module. He had been teaching her for 2 days, so he decided to work with her alone. So he was having a discussion with her, and she was confusing some things. So during their conversation, he asked her what was one of her objectives. He told her that he wanted to be a doctor, and she said that her objective was to learn to read and write. At this moment, being in front of this woman, everything began to swirl around his head. He was silent. She had come to the sessions faithfully so she could learn the module designed for low literate people. He had taught her for 2 days on the basis that she knew the alphabet. Now she was saying to him that she did not. He felt that he had failed her because he really wanted her to learn the information. She was HIV positive. She was HIV positive for about 13 years. She had 3 children and made special arrangements to be there every day faithfully. Carson felt powerless. What could he do? It was important that she understood the information. She was HIV positive, and so he renewed his effort, and she finally got it. And she was happy, and she said she was going to go home and teach her children. But for Carson, that feeling of powerlessness was his moment of consciousness about himself and the world. His generosity, his good deeds would not fundamentally change the inequality between them, that he would always have more and be more. He was from the greatest country in the world, and she was from an island. But at this moment, who was greater? He wanted for Stephanie, who was HIV positive, who left her children at home, who was suffering from Kaposi sarcoma, and who came to learn from him this irrational belief that this American kid knew more and was more and can teach her something was undeserved. We had spent a great deal of time reflecting on the hegemony that Americans carried with them everywhere in the world. This reality of his hegemony was something from which he could not extricate himself. He felt unworthy of her, of her unequivocal trust in him, and he felt humbled by her. This humility can only come from this consciousness that his intractable privilege and equality, the consciousness of his intractable privilege, that equality between them cannot come by acts in her favor, but only come from a lifelong commitment to change the injustices that surrounded them. The second story is one that is endemic to many students. We were at the primary school in the township, the same school that I talked about earlier, of Cato Crest. This was about 5 years ago. And although I have very strong feelings about charity, I allowed the students to give blankets and clothes and things that were needed for the winter for the students in the school. That school had a very high rate of HIV positive children. About 30% of the children were HIV positive. We gave those things to the person in charge, and then we decided that we would give each student small packets of goodies, stickers and candies and other kids' trinkets. We brought them in a small room, and my students gave them each some of these treats. Later, my students complained that they felt awkward, that they did not know they did not know the children, but they were giving them things. They didn't know them, but they were giving them things. The analysis is that it was forced. They were not comfortable. So in our reflection meeting that evening, they were talking about their discomfort. And so I said they should choose which discomfort they wanted, theirs or the kids who had to open their hands to them. At the end of the week, when we were leaving, the kids came up to us in the same room and presented each one of us with a gift and sang to us and thanked us. Indeed, the thanks were pouring all over our heads. Slowly, my students began to feel uncomfortable because in their minds they had really done very little. In our reflection meeting that night, this discomfort reigned. It is intuitive to say, it's all right, you don't have to thank me, to deflect away. But these were poor people who didn't have anything and still they gave us. The generosity of the poor is a humbling experience. They give us out of the little that they have, and they are profuse in their thanks. And the students cannot say, it was nothing. We really didn't do very much, because they can't say that, because they did very much. And so they are silenced. They cannot say this because they know that even the little they did is the result of an unjust order. And they are humbled, but they were unfailingly polite. They were humbled, but they were polite. But this was a kind of false humility because it was lacking in grace. And this is grace where you must experience that this moment of privilege is theirs, not yours. You must accept without reservation and angst about the very small things you've done, and to know that this is praxis. They are saying to you that we are making a place for at least one moment where we are shifting the order. We are not just supplicants with our hands outstretched, but we too can be generous and engage with you as full and equal human beings. To neither see this or appreciate this is to continue to infantilize the poor. And so you must open your hands and receive with true grace and humility. This is the practice of consciousness which must happen every day. This is counter-hegemonic education. Still, the generosity of the oppressor is nourished by an unjust order, which must be maintained in order to justify that generosity. And when I get my students to understand that they are participants in this unjust order, and I see that they enter into spaces with humility and consciousness, I am exhilarated. I see one day that that American swagger wanes. The students become more human and learn that the responsibility of privilege is humility and respect, and that the best way of being an American in the world is not to flaunt their gifts, but to be a gift. To come home with new eyes and see their world a little differently, and to challenge themselves to a lifelong struggle for social justice. Then, when that happens, I feel that my work is done. Thank you.